It's one of history's most terrifying questions, isn't it? How does an entire nation fall under the spell of a dictator? Today, we're going to try and understand the rise of Adolf Hitler. We're not just looking at it as some event that just happened, but as a process, a series of steps that took a failed artist and turned him into the architect of a world war. All right, let's get into it. And this is really the question at the heart of it all. How did the specific conditions, the political moves, and the vulnerabilities in German society at the time make his catastrophic rise to power even possible? See, this isn't just a story about one evil man. It's a look at the circumstances that allow people like him to take control. So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with his pretty unlikely beginnings. Then, we'll trace his path to power, see how he forged a dictatorship, and finally, look at the absolutely devastating consequences. Okay, so Section 1, an unlikely beginning. Before he was ever a political figure, Adolf Hitler was a man pretty much defined by failure and frustration. Think about this. He was rejected not once, but twice from the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. And these rejections, well, they were way more than just career setbacks. His time as a struggling artist in Vienna exposed him to these really powerful, extreme ideas of nationalism and anti-Semitism. It was right there, in the middle of his own personal failures, that all these resentments started to boil over and his hateful ideology really began to take shape. Then came World War I, and it gave him something he'd never really had before, a sense of purpose, a place to belong. He was a dedicated soldier, no doubt, but Germany's eventual defeat and the humiliating terms of surrender didn't just disappoint him, they radicalized him completely, twisting his patriotism into something far, far more dangerous. To channel all that national shame and anger, he and others pushed this incredibly powerful and totally poisonous lie, the stab in the back myth. This conspiracy theory gave Germans a simple scapegoat for some really complex problems. It became a cornerstone of Hitler's message, reframing a military defeat as a story of betrayal from within. So you've got this potent mix of personal anger and national humiliation. And that's what really sets the stage for his political journey, which kicks off in the absolute chaos of post-war Germany, the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic was just facing a perfect storm. I mean, imagine it. Crippling war debt, hyperinflation so bad that your life savings became worthless overnight, and then, to top it all off, the Great Depression hits. This just created this widespread feeling of desperation and anger, and it made people hungry for a strong leader, anyone who promised to restore order and national pride. Now, this timeline shows a really crucial shift in his strategy. After a failed attempt to seize power by force in 1923, what's known as the Beer Hall Putsch, Hitler realized that wasn't going to work. So he changed tactics. Instead of overthrowing the Republic, he decided he would dismantle it from the inside, using its own democratic system against it. For a decade, he built the Nazi Party into a political force, feeding on public anger, until 1933, when the political establishment, thinking they could control him, made a fatal mistake and appointed him chancellor. So how did he do it? Well, this quote from his own book really reveals the secret ingredient: masterful propaganda. The Nazis used these huge rallies, posters, radio, everything to build a cult of personality around Hitler. They presented him as Germany's savior, all while relentlessly demonizing their enemies. And that brings us to Section 3. Because being appointed chancellor wasn't the end goal. It was the starting pistol. It was the beginning of a rapid, ruthless destruction of the German state, right from the inside. The speed of this is just staggering. Within a month of him taking office, the German parliament building caught fire. It was the perfect excuse to suspend basic civil rights. Just a month after that, the Enabling Act gave him the power to pass laws without parliament's approval, basically making him a legal dictator. By the time he purged his own internal rivals in the Night of the Long Knives, any real opposition was gone. In less than 18 months, German democracy had been systematically and, chillingly, legally taken apart. All right, on to Section 4, the devastating consequences. With absolute power secured at home, Hitler immediately turned his focus outward, and he plunged Germany and the entire world into darkness. What's so jarring here is the contrast between the glorious future the Nazis promised and the horrific reality they created. The promise of living space, Lebensraum, for Germans led to a war that left the whole continent in ruins. The promise of racial purity led to the systematic murder of millions of human beings. The human cost is almost impossible to wrap your head around. The war that his regime started led to the deaths of over 70 million people worldwide, soldiers and civilians. The sheer scale of it all, as this chart kind of hints at, brought destruction to nearly every corner of the globe.
And inside that global catastrophe was a uniquely horrifying evil. We have to be crystal clear about this. The Holocaust was not a byproduct of the war. It was a central ideological goal of the Nazi regime from the very beginning. It was the systematic, industrialized murder of 6 million Jewish men, women, and children, along with millions of others they considered undesirable.
The regime that promised to last 1,000 years, it lasted just 12. The big turning point came with the crushing defeat at Stalingrad in 1943. From that point on, the Third Reich was squeezed from both the East and the West, especially after the D-Day landings opened up a massive new front. The collapse was inevitable. In the spring of 1945, with Berlin in ruins, Hitler killed himself, just days before Germany's unconditional surrender. So, after all of that, what can we take away? What are the lessons here? First, that severe economic hardship can create fertile ground for extremists. Second, propaganda is an incredibly powerful tool for turning fear into political power. Third, and this one is maybe the most chilling, democracies can be legally dismantled from the inside. And finally, unchecked authoritarianism always leads to catastrophe. And all of that leaves us with one final and really crucial question to think about. If we understand how it happened back then, it forces us to ask, what are the warning signs we should all be looking for today when a democracy starts to erode,